I'm Warren.
And I'm Kerry Thomas Cody.
And we are the Skull Crawler. And we ask you to suspend disbelief, the show where we invite you to open your mind and expand your horizons as we discuss taboo and otherwise mysterious occurrences in our universe. On this week's episode, we're going to, just preface a little bit, we're going to be doing a few episodes where we talk about movies based on actual events and how right those movies got the source material and how much was embellished.
Yeah.
On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the Popes Exorcist, which came out this year, 2023, starring Russell Crowe, directed by Julius Avery.
Yeah, so just a heads up, guys. We're going to be getting pretty spooky in this episode. We're going to be talking about some taboo stuff. There is a specific demon in this episode, and I don't think I'm going to say his name because I don't know if I'm willing to go there yet, you know? Maybe after a couple more podcasts, but I will insert his name anytime that I don't say his name, so you guys can hear it and you can research in for yourself. And this also gets into some pretty brutal stuff. There's some sexual assault stuff. There is abuse from the church. It's about exorcisms and the Catholic Church, so prepare yourself for that. So we're about to get into it.
In this film, I play a real man, Father Gabriele Amorth.
I am the chief exorcist of the Vatican. My position was appointed by the Pope.
It was actually a real job in the Vatican. The majority of cases do not require an exorcism.
98% are recommended by him to doctors and psychiatrists.
The other 2%, I call it evil. He was a very controversial character. He performed thousands of exorcisms and had not only done it for 36 years, but had documented the things that he'd experienced. If evil does not exist, what then is the role of the church? He discovered some of the darkest days of the Catholic Church. The Vatican must have known. They buried the truth here. It's a very dark pursuit, and his faith gave him a certain level of courage to do the job. Whatever you do, you only do because God allows it. Did he allow that? We are getting closer to hell.
Yeah, I guess before we start, we've both seen the movie, right?
Oh, you watched it?
Yeah, I did watch it.
Thank God, dude. Holy cow. Well, okay, you liked it. Okay, because
I did like it, yeah.
The general consensus online is that it is really bad and people hated it, and I don't know how well it did at the box office.
I wouldn't did well enough to get a sequel. They're going to do another one.
Yeah, I sure hope so. But also, I saw that Russell Crowe said that he may retire from acting, so we'll see. I hope that he doesn't because dude freaking rocks. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I basically knew nothing about it going into it, and traditionally, possession movies aren't necessarily my thing. So I don't know. I steer away from them. I've only seen 2 possession movies. I mean, aside from Evil Dead, which those are more fun, campy. But I saw The Exorcist when I was 11. Went to a friend's house, and his mom was like, "You guys want to watch a scary movie?" And we're like, "Yeah." Sean Littleton, by the way, shout out. I don't know what your mom's up to, but Tammy, dude, you rock. But it scared us so bad. We watched The Exorcist, and yeah, it scared the crap out of me. I don't even know if we finished it, to be honest. I'm pretty sure we did. But it's lived in my brain ever since. I don't think I've ever seen any of the sequels. I did see The Exorcism of Emily Rose. That's it. That's
Emily Rose, yeah.
And that
movie. Found footage one. Wait, is that found footage one?
I don't think so, but it takes place in a court case, and it does flashbacks. And that one is actually inspired by a real life haunting a possession called The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel, which is a story from the 60s. This little German girl, I think she was 13, got possessed, and the whole thing is just wild. So that's one that we'll talk about another time. But this one is The Pope's Exorcist. And the movie was a lot of fun. It's really, I don't know, it feels like an Indiana Jones, Da Vinci Code type story, more so than like a traditional horror possession story. And I really enjoyed it because those are like my types of movies. What do you think?
I really like because there's a certain like preachiness that I don't enjoy about the Conjuring movies, where it's like I don't know, the faith like the last one really rubbed me like wrong, because there's like oh, the power of love, like when she saved her husband from getting possessed by the whatever, or the devil.
Yeah.
It's like, that's so cheesy. Like, I didn't like that.
It was a little cheesy, but I mean, the last one wasn't great. It's definitely my least favorite out of all of the other ones. But that's all right, you know.
But this movie, it's not action-y, but it's more of like a
mystery thriller with, like, you know, a good portion of it's horror for sure, but you know, most of it is definitely you know, mystery thriller type situation. And I really enjoyed that aspect because, you know, you have to find out what the demon's name is, and before you can, you know, save the kid, and the kid's going to expire soon. So
that part of it was fun. Like, I like stories like that where they treat the thing as real. Like, it's like, oh, we have to solve this mystery. We have to trace back this lineage of this church, and you know what they did.
Super enjoyed it. Anyway, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tell the plot of the story the plot of the movie as if it's a story. So I'm going to kind of break down all the points, and you can help fill in here and there. And then after that, we'll discuss the real versus what wasn't real, what was exaggerated, whatever. All right, so we're going to dive right in. Father Gabriele Amorth, the Pope's Exorcist. The devil is always hiding. The thing he wants above all is that we don't believe he exists. In 1987, Father Gabriele Amorth, the Pope's personal exorcist, an earthy, scooter-riding, humorous practical man, visits an Italian village where a man is seemingly possessed by a demon. With the local priest, Amorth enters the room where the man is tied up. While exorcising him using a Saint Benedict metal sacramental, Amorth taunts the demon, challenging it to possess a pig. When it does, the pig is killed with a shotgun. Now let's talk about the opening scene. That went hard right off the bat. I mean, generally for movies, I am not the biggest fan of, you know, killing animals. I mean, come on, guys. But it was brutal. I mean, it's a horror movie. What do you expect? Sometimes animals die, and that's just how it goes. This incident gets Amorth in trouble with a church tribunal since he acted without permission from superiors. One tribunal, remember, is a friendly African bishop, Lumumba, but another is a vicious American cardinal, Sullivan, skeptical of demonic possession. Amorth replies that evil does exist, and that he did not perform an actual exorcism, but rather some psychological theater to help the mentally ill man. Disgusted, Amorth walks out of the tribunal. So there's this heated argument that goes on, and Pope's exorcist, Gabriele Amorth, is in trouble for what he did because he basically killed a pig in front of a whole family, which is freaking brutal. And the Vatican finds out about it. He gets in trouble. Turns out it wasn't a real exorcism. He just used that as reverse psychology to make the guy think that the demon climbed out of his body, went to the pig, and so the Pope assigns Amorth to visit a possessed boy named Henry in Spain. Henry, his mother Julia, and his rebellious teen-age sister Amy had traveled from America to take possession of a mysterious old Spanish abbey, basically an old Catholic church ground, that Julia's husband's soul bequests to his family after he died in a car accident where Henry was present. The traumatized Henry has not spoken since the accident. Following a sinister fire, workers who are restoring the abbey so the family could sell it, leave. Henry believes, behaving bizarrely, the supernatural events unfold. Serum chemistry panels and MRIs show nothing abnormal. So he finds something spooky in the house. It's like a hidden room in the basement. He looks inside of it and gets possessed. And it starts off with a general possession story. He hasn't said a word in a whole year since his dad died. And suddenly he's speaking again. He's like, "Mommy, mommy." And he's like, "I want Milky." And it was kind of, it was kind of weird because he's like, 11. And she's like, "I don't know who this kid is, but this kid's a freak." And he's like, "Bring me the priest." And so they're like, and they're not like church going people. So they're like, "What the F?" But they're desperate enough to help their kid that they at least get the priest out there. Diabolically possessed, Henry requests a priest. The local father, Tomas Esquivel, arrives, but Henry obscenely derides him. So as soon as this youngster, this little priest comes in, he tries to start talking to the demon and then just gets thrown back to the back wall, just flies through the air, and he's like, "Wrong priest." Amorth arrives and enlists Esquivel as an assistant, though Esquivel is untrained as an exorcist. Esquivel has heard of Amorth, but has not read any of Amorth's books. Amorth believes they are good books. Amorth advocates the importance of prayer, though Esquivel makes mistakes as an assistant exorcist, including strangling Henry when Henry antagonizes him, mocking him for his sins. So this ain't no normal possession. They go in there and they go talk to the kid, and the kid starts talking to Tomas because he realizes he's the weak one in the room, and just like can instantly read his mind, knows what his sins are, calls him out on that. And Tomas, who takes it personal, he runs over there and just like Homer Simpsons this kid, which is exactly what the demon wanted. So
yeah, and it's your classic young priest, old priest dynamic, like in The Exorcist.
yeah, exactly. Good cop, bad cop type situation.
Yeah, exactly.
The duo attempt to exorcise Henry, but without success, as he stutters blasphemous phrases during the rite. Henry's demon even possesses Amy at times. Amorth finds Julia has not been a religious believer since childhood. Still, he convinces her to pray after she reveals she believed her guardian angel helped her in her youth. In Rome, the Pope becomes ill while reading documents about the Spanish case and is hospitalized. Amorth finds a well on the abbey grounds and is going down the complex sealed off by the church as demonically dangerous. He learns what a founder of the Spanish Inquisition, an exorcist, was possessed, which let him infiltrate the church and do many evils. Amorth finds the church cover this up and eventually discovers the name of Henry's demon. And I'm going to spell it out for you guys. Asmodeus, which will assist the exorcism. So they have to do a little digging. They have to do a little Harry Potter type stuff. And they search the grounds of the house while the kid is, he's not going to last very much longer. So they go into the basement. They find out that there's like a secret wall. So they break it down with a sledgehammer or whatever. And they get in there and they find this whole like kind of library type tomb situation, and there's some skeletons in there. There's a guy in like a birdcage type thing, obviously left there to die, who we can only assume was the priest who was possessed. And then, of course, they find a journal and one of the dead guy's shirts. They find the name of the demon, and they're like, "Bada bing, that's all we needed. And now we can go save this kid's life." Which this whole storyline and this whole plot twist was actually like really good in my opinion.
This is the coolest part of the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they go in that room, like you said.
Yeah.
But like, there's like an additional like cave.
Yeah.
That's like locked away behind like a door. And then when they go in that cave, there's like monoliths and like demonic stuff on it. And there's like a throne. Yeah. It's like, it's so cool.
Yeah, yeah. And this little tomb has been consecrated by the church to never be used again, everybody gone into, basically forgotten about. But not only that, the Pope, right before he gets sick, is reading through these old files in the Vatican, and he sees that everything is omitted with like a whiteout or something like that. And he's like, why is everything omitted? Like, how bad was this case that we had to hide our own history? And then Father Amorth basically finds out what happens down there. Amorth and Escobar participate in the sacrament of confession and absolution, mutually confessing and absolving each other of their sins. That, after Amorth, an Italian partisan, survived World War II and vowed to serve God in gratitude, a mentally ill woman asked Amorth for help. She was convinced she was possessed, and Amorth denied working with her because he let someone else deal with her since she was actually just mentally ill. It turns out that she was sexually abused by the church within the church walls, and it was covered up. Father Amorth later sees her at the top of the church, and she jumps off and unalives herself. We'll say that. And he's forever haunted by this. I mean, how could you not? It's basically your fault. You can ask for forgiveness all you want, but you know that you could have helped this girl, and you didn't. So, all right. His younger partner, Escobar's greatest sin is that he had not confessed. Okay, sorry, let me read that again. His younger partner's Escobar greatest sin that he had not confessed yet was that he fell in love with a woman. He made love with her and left her to continue with priesthood. After confessing, the two ready themselves. Amorth instructs Escobar to wear a miraculous metal necklace. During the exorcism, they have horrible visions of the women whom they failed. The exorcism succeeds only when Amorth offers himself to be possessed, which chimes the demon, previously stating that he wants to destroy Amorth. The whole exorcism scene is freaking bananas. They're both thrown to the ceiling. Henry's sister gets possessed for part of it. Her neck just like turns backwards. It's insane. But, normal possession stuff, Amorth tries to hang himself, but the demon doesn't allow it, preferring that Amorth infiltrate and destroy the church. However, Escobar comes in clutch, armed with his faith, comes in and prays the demon out of Father Amorth in the most intense exorcism scene of all time. So let's talk about that a little bit. So Amorth is possessed. He's slowly losing control of himself. He knows that it's a matter of time before he's fully taken over by this demon, which he finds out is like the king of hell. And it's just this real bad dude who's responsible for doing all this really nasty stuff, mainly with the Spanish Inquisition back in the 14 and 1500s, where they persecuted thousands and thousands of people, murdered them, way worse, in the name of Christ, which is evil. And most of us grew up in church, but we don't learn about this stuff. And so I personally think it's important that, we find out the harm of what Christianity has done so we don't recreate history. You know what I mean? Anyway, so the movie kind of explains that as that this demon possessed this exorcist way back then, and then used him to infiltrate the Catholic Church to kind of tell them like what to do, and all of these evil acts have been done in his name. And eventually the church found out about it, locked him in this cave tomb area just to be forgotten about forever. And then he's possessed in this guy, and then he dies, and he is in there forever. The triumphant duo visit Rome and find Sullivan, the a-hole bishop from the beginning, who has taken leave in Guam, being replaced by Lumumba, the guy who believes in and supports exorcisms. Amorth and Escobar are admitted to a special church archive. Lumumba tells them that they will be visiting the 199 other evil sites, Lumumba takes them on a tour and explains that San Sebastian Abbey, the abbey that they were at, was one of the sites where the 200 angels fell from heaven and turned into demons, explaining the inception of this particular demon. With the help of a map Amorth discovered at the abbey to combat the devil, Amorth jokes that he and Escobar are going to hell. And the scene is pretty awesome at this point. Because Lumumba is like, well, I'm going to have to send you to 199 other sites. And Amorth is like, well, I can't do it alone. And he looks at his partner. His partner's like, let's get started, or whatever he says. And I was like, yeah. It was cool, dude. I totally watch more movies about this, or a TV show, or whatever. It's basically, the John Wick of exorcisms. I thought it was sick. So that's basically the movie. The movie I enjoyed it. It's really easy to follow.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. It's based, I guess, for the most part in actual Christianity and Catholicism, the lore, I guess, how you would say it, the lore of like fallen angels and
Sure.
like the history of the church.
Mhm.
I think that was the most interesting part of it. And just briefly, the name of the demon. My wife and I were watching a movie and I tried to figure out, I was like, where had I heard that name before?
Hmm.
And the name of that demon is the demon in the new Paranormal Activity movie.
No
Like the same
way.
demon. Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool.
And it has like that has the same lore too of like he comes out of a well or whatever. Like it was the same thing in that movie. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. I was like, that's an odd coincidence. Like 2 movies recently have the same demon or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I liked it a lot. Like especially the ending, like where they, I guess, allude to like if they want to do more movies, they would just be them going to different sites and exercising those demons or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it was cool. Like setup for a sequel if they do one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it thoroughly. All right, so we are 20 minutes in. We've basically talked about the whole movie. I don't know if I have anything else to say about the movie, but I'm sure that throughout the rest of this episode, we'll talk plenty about it. Starting from the top, what is an exorcism? It is a religious or spiritual practice of evicting demons, jinns, or other malevolent spiritual entities from a person or an area that is believed to be possessed. Depending on the spiritual beliefs of the exorcist, this may be done by causing the entity to swear an oath, performing an elaborate ritual, or simply by commanding it to depart in the name of a higher power. The practice is ancient and is part of the belief system of many cultures and religions. Who is Gabriele Amorth? The works of Father Gabriele Amorth might have been exaggerated in this movie. However, there is some truth to it. Father Amorth has written many books on the subject of exorcisms. He is said to have performed thousands of exorcisms. By thousands, I mean he claimed to perform like 60 or 70,000 exorcisms, which there's not even that many days, in the years that he performed exorcism. But we'll get to all that here in a little bit. However, he would only perform them once the subject has seen a medical doctor and a psychiatrist. He is quoted to say that out of every 100 exorcisms, maybe 2 were really possessed. He also had ways to see if they were really possessed. He would ask the subjects if they knew who his name was. Oftentimes, they would actually know who his name was. He would also taunt them. His famous thing would be sticking his thumb on his nose and do this whole thing to taunt the demons, which is extremely interesting. He was also known by his sense of humor. He would tell them jokes. He was famous for saying something like, the reason why the devil hates me is because I'm uglier than he is, which is silly. But during an exorcism, you're like, okay. I think it shows that he is very confident in himself, for sure. He would get the demons all riled up, which would eventually help his cause, which, if he got enough out of them, he would exhaust them enough to exorcise them out of the subject. How long was Gabriele Amorth the Vatican's chief exorcist? Father Amorth, who was ordained a Roman Catholic priest in 1954, wasn't appointed to be the assistant to the Vatican's chief exorcist, Candido Amontini, until 1986, when he was 61. The movie begins the following year, 1987. While exploring the Pope's Exorcist, fact versus fiction, we discovered that, unlike the film, Father Amorth had no previous experience as an exorcist. In real life, he spent 6 years training under Father Candido before taking the role of chief exorcist in 1992, when Father Candido died. As Russell Crowe's character emphasizes in the film, he answered only to the Pope, a detail that made his position unique. In 1990, Father Amorth founded the International Association of Exorcists with French exorcist Father René Chenesau, can't pronounce that. Headquartered in Rome, the association was recognized by the Vatican. Amorth served as president until he retired in 2000. He served as the chief exorcist of the Diocese of Rome for approximately 24 years until his death in 2016. He definitely was a real person. He was a real exorcist. He was exactly who he said he was. He had enormous faith, and he did only answer to the Pope, who is the head dude of all Catholicism, which is extremely interesting. Previous to this movie, I didn't even know that the Vatican, which is like this high organization of Catholic officials, basically the Illuminati, but I didn't say that. The amount of secrets that they hold, they know so much, and they're keeping it all secret. That's a whole thing. We can get into that another time.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think the Vatican technically operates as its own sovereign nation too.
Yeah, it's its own country within Rome, like its own tiny little, which is extremely strange. And the Pope is basically, a celebrity in the world, and even like churches and like Protestant churches in America, we still respect the Pope and respect him as an official of the church, which is extremely interesting. So all of that was accurate from the movie. Main things that weren't accurate was that there was the family that was in the movie, that was all fictional. And the truth behind Father Amorth is that he never let anyone document his cases until his very last one in 2016, which we can talk about that here in a little bit. So he has a handful of books, like 3 or 4 books on the subject, literally wrote the book on the subject of exorcisms. And a lot of stories are hidden in those books. And they drew some inspirations from this movie from some of those stories, which I think is cool. I think it's totally fine. It's kind of Abraham Lincoln vampire hunter type. That's basically what this movie is to real exorcisms. And that's okay. And that is completely okay, because it doesn't even pretend like based on a true story. It's just like they talk about how the real Pope's Exorcist, blah, 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 Anyway, cool. Really cool. What else was fictional? He didn't actually ride a scooter. A little moped, I know. He's just... I thought that was the coolest part about him. But he was funny. He did crack jokes at everybody all the time. And that was just a part of his personality, which I think is cool. All right, so Rosaria from the film. Rosaria was the woman that he refused to help because he was too busy, he had too much pride or whatever, and she ended up offing herself. Was she real? Turns out, in order to inject the film's fictional storyline with elements from reality, the movie hints at several real-life events, including the Spanish Inquisition and the disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi, or Vatican Girl, which is what she's officially known as. And this is a documented case. This is a real thing that happened. With regard to the latter, Father Amorth, Russell Crowe, confesses to his apprentice, Father Escobel, to being partially responsible for the suicide of a young girl named Rosario, who jumped to her death. He explains that she had been suffering from mental illness and alludes to rumors that she had been sexually abused within the Vatican's walls. The last detail links the character to Emanuela Orlandi, who vanished on her way home from a music class in Rome in June 1983 when she was 15, never to be seen again. In 2012, the real Father Gabriele Amorth claimed that Emanuela Orlandi, whose father had worked for the Vatican, was kidnapped for sex parties for Vatican police before she was murdered. He claimed that foreign diplomats were involved as well. In 2022, the Netflix docuseries Vatican Girl, The Disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi, included the testimony of an anonymous woman who claimed to have been one of Orlandi's best friends. She said that Orlandi had confided in her that she had been molested multiple times in the Vatican gardens by someone close to the Pope. In the movie, Crowe's character questions the Vatican officials as to why Rosaria's death hadn't been properly investigated. That one is a pretty haunting thing. We know that's probably happened dozens, hundreds of times within churches and within the Catholic Church. And we know about the sins of the Catholic Church for the most part. I'm sure that most of them go undocumented, and nobody sees any type of punishment for them. And so this is just one of many that became possessed because they were mentally ill, or at least convinced themselves that they were possessed, that they just snapped and they couldn't handle it anymore, and their mind immediately went to, I'm feeling this way because there's a demon inside of me, not because no one's listening to me, no one's loving me, blah blah blah.
It's also, it's just a betrayal of someone you're supposed to confide into, like your priest, and they, do that stuff. Like there's a line in the movie that I think is pretty clever, but like it's like when you think about it, like, oh, but when she says as she's possessed, to Father Gabriel. She says, "I've seen the devil," and he's like, "What does he look like?" And she says, "He looks like you." And then you
Oh, I
realize,
forgot about that.
yeah, and then you realize it's because
Yeah.
the priest too. Yeah,
Yikes, dude.
yeah.
The abbey was the Abbey of San Sebastian in the movie A Real Abbey. While the Gothic structure provides a perfect setting for a horror movie, the Pope's Exorcist fact check reveals that the Abbey of San Sebastian never existed in real life. There is an abbey with a similar name in the region, the Abbey of Santo Domingo de Silos, which is called San Sebastian de Silos during the 10th century. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce words, apparently.
No, I was going to say it's that San Sebastian Abbey.
Oh. But it is a structure that has a cloister and a central courtyard. It looks nothing like the Gothic Abbey in the movie, which we come to learn is built on top of a temple that had been constructed by worshippers of that particular demon, an angel who fell to earth after being expelled from the kingdom of heaven. The Gothic Abbey showcased in Russell Crowe's Exorcism movie is actually Ireland's Dromore Castle, which stands for the fictional Abbey of San Sebastian. Cool. Yeah, great setting for a horror movie. Horrifying place. Kind of reminded me of, The Haunting of Hill House in a way, but like almost a castle, like huge. Pretty cool. All right. So moving on to the storyline of the Spanish Inquisition. Was the Spanish Inquisition undertaken at the behest of a master exorcist who had himself become possessed by a demon? The Spanish Inquisition was a tribunal established in 1478 by the Catholic monarchy in Spain to identify and prosecute heretics. It began as a way to ensure citizens who had converted from Judaism to Islam to Catholicism were upholding the tenets of their new faith. Many were forced to convert or faced expulsion. Heresy was considered to be a crime against the state, since the authority of the monarchy was believed to come from God. It's true that the Inquisition also punished those who believed to be witches or devil worshippers, but only 11 people accused of witchcraft were actually put to death, not thousands. The Spanish Inquisition, which was not the first of its kind, lasted until it was abolished under the reign of Isabella II in 1834. Now that's almost 400 years, guys. The Spanish Inquisition lasted a long time, did a lot of damage. What can you do? History is not nice sometimes. Roughly 2.7% of those who were prosecuted were put to death, between 3,000 and 5,000 people. Many others were tortured. The movie postulates that the Inquisition was set into motion by a master exorcist named Friar Alonso de Ojeda, who had been possessed by the demon. The demon's goal was to give God and the church a bad name. According to the film, possessed Friar de Ojeda convinced Queen Isabella I of Castile to start the Spanish Inquisition in 1478. In researching how accurate the Pope's Exorcist, it is not surprising to learn that the explanation for how the Spanish Inquisition began doesn't line up with the perspectives of historians. While there is a powerful demon named in Judeo-Islamic lore, the events involving in the film are fictional. However, the storyline does echo Father Amorth's own opinions to some degree, at least in the sense that he believes that in the early 1980s that the Vatican had been infiltrated by the devil, but in the form of temptation and sin, not a demon. The movie depicts that the demon attempting to infiltrate the Vatican by possessing Father Amorth, Russell Crowe. So there's some real stuff to it. I think that writing off the evil that were done by lots of officials and church of the Spanish Inquisition as demon possession, I think that's I think that's taking away credit from how evil these people were. They were power hungry. They were using the Lord's name to do whatever they wanted to, and to the point of murdering people and whatever they could in the name of Christ, as far as advancing to other parts of the world, even like Mexico, Central America, South America, freaking Christopher Columbus. Come on, all of that evil was done by real people, and probably not demons. So taking away credit from those people, I think is the only thing that I don't love, but it's a fun storyline.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fun plot point for a theatrical movie, but it's
But it also teaches us in a fun way that these evils were done, and some people might not have known about it. And I think it's important to even bring up the evil that's done by the Catholic Church in general, because there's a lot still going on.
Yeah.
So, Spanish Inquisition. There's a lot to talk about. I am not educated enough on the subject to really talk more about it. I'd love to deep dive more into it. I don't want to feel like I'm attacking Christianity or religions or anything like that, but it is kind of fascinating history. Anyway, we're moving on. Crazy real exorcism stories. The works of Father Gabriele Amorth might have been exaggerated in this movie. However, there is some truth to it. I read that. Going back, okay. The priest who had the number of the beast. As the Vatican's chief exorcist for 30 years, Father Gabriele Amorth claimed to have dealt with the devil 60,000 times. Now, a new book is telling his head-spinning story. Father Gabriele Amorth often asked to help people whose troubles were mundane, but he was convinced he faced evil incarnate one morning in 1997 in Rome, Italy. Young Italian man was brought, accompanied by his priest and a translator. As the Vatican's chief exorcist, Gabriele Amorth was asked to help people whose troubles turned out to be far more mundane than demonic possession. However, he was convinced he faced evil incarnate one morning in 1997 when a young Italian man was brought to his room. The peasant was accompanied by his priest and another man. The latter was a translator. For a while, the afflicted man spoke only Italian. The evil spirit inside him spoke perfect English, he was told. Father Amorth started the exorcism in Latin, and the moment he mentioned Jesus' name, the young man fixed his gaze on him and began to yell curses and threats in English, then spitting and making out as if he was about to attack him. When the exorcist arrived at the prayer, Praecipio tibi, I command you, the demon went briefly quiet. But then, screaming and howling, the demon burst forth and looked straight at him, drooling saliva from the man's mouth. Father Amorth continued the rite of liberation, demanding the demonic presence reveal its name. He was shocked when he was told it was Lucifer himself. Momentarily shaken by confronting the devil, he nonetheless plowed on. The possessed man resumed his shrieking, twisting his head back and rolling his eyes. His back arched for a quarter of an hour. The room became extremely cold and ice crystals formed on the windows and the walls. Moments after the exorcist ordered Lucifer to abandon the peasant, the young man's body stiffened and began to levitate, hovering at least 3 feet in the air for several minutes before collapsing to a chair. Finally, Satan admitted defeat, announcing the exact day and hour that he would leave the man's body. While the afflicted man only spoke Italian, the evil spirit inside him spoke perfect English, he was told. This is a story from the book, The Devil is Afraid of Me, containing astonishing new details, including the horrific demonic encounter in 1997 about the extraordinary life of Father Amorth. I wish that was on camera. I wish we could have seen something superhuman, supernatural happen like that, because, man, that would have been crazy.
Yeah.
But still, a fascinating story nonetheless. Did Father Gabriele Amorth become part of a team of exorcists that was similar to a holy version of the Avengers? No. The movie ends with Cardinal Lumumba telling Father Amorth and Father Escobel that their mission will be to use the map they discovered at the Abbey to find the remaining 199 unholy locations where they will battle the devil. Clearly, this is setting a stage for a sequel, but it's entirely fictional. And while Father Amorth did have priests assist him during the exorcisms, he was never part of a duo or a team of exorcists. Prior to his death, was Father Gabriele Amorth aware that there was going to be a movie made about him? Yes. Father Amorth sold his life rights for the film in 2015, died the prior year. He felt that the producers were committing to treating his work with respect and would honestly depict his devotion to the Catholic Church. The script went through several revisions, and it's unlikely that the real Father Amorth knew that the movie would falsely depict him as allowing himself to become possessed, which, of course, never happened. It's insane that anybody would let them get possessed, but whatever. I think it's cool. The ultimate sacrifice, sure. It's likely that he believed that the film would remain loyal to his actual cases. Instead of veering so far into the realm of fantasy, it's hard to say how the movie would look if Father Amorth were still alive. But it's not hard to imagine that he would have preferred something more grounded in reality. None of this to say that Russell Crowe didn't do his homework before taking on the role of Father Amorth. In fact, Crowe emphasized the real Father Amorth's life that grabbed his attention was more than the fictionalized story of the original script he received. It was the thing that interested me about the project, was the person, not necessarily every aspect of the original script that I was sent, Crowe revealed in an interview. So I started by looking into him, and then I went to Rome, and I spent some time talking to friends of his and people who worked with him. It was his real life story that I connected to, So a lot of these elements that are in the movie now were brought into the film by some of the research I did. I read the first 2 books. I've got another 10 to go. Holy cow, 12 books. I read a lot of the articles. Obviously, he wrote hundreds, but not all of them have been translated into English. For me, it was, the core compelling aspect of the life of Gabriele Amorth. All in all, the movie is an Inglourious Bastards or an Abraham Lincoln vampire hunter or an Ip Man version of his life, which I see nothing wrong with. But I'd love to see some sequels. I think it's a fun way to tell a story. That's basically all I've got. That's my my presentation. That's my PowerPoint. The class. I did a lot of research on this one.
Fun notes, fun little factoids.
Yeah.
So Father Amorth, we just talked about him. William Friedkin, who is the director of The Exorcist, he did a documentary about Father Amorth called Devil and Father Amorth.
Yeah. Which actually I think that we can probably include some scenes.
Die metodamente costui, come il cosigno, e tu vide il ministro lì se ti indigno, forse sinonimo saveria, neque creatura andai, le circostante, cuore noto, quello modo anche sospenda, in nome del Padre, e Figlio, Spirito Santo, via.
I did also watch it. And
oh, really? Oh, okay.
I did. Yeah, I heard about it. I watched. I think it's the documentary. I didn't actually watch the whole documentary. Sorry, I just watched the part where he exorcised this older lady, and the exorcism itself is extremely unsettling, very haunting for me as a believer of that type of stuff. For me, what gets me is her voice. I don't know. It's just hard for me to imagine somebody warping their voice in that way. And that's something that I think that the movie gets very accurately compared to that clip from the real Father Amorth, which was apparently the only video documented exorcism that he ever allowed. And it was apparently his last one as well.
Mhm.
I did hear that the lady was never actually exorcised, that they just stopped hearing from her because it was apparently like months long. The exorcism was. It was a whole extenuous thing, and they just never heard from her again. They couldn't find her. They tried reaching out for her, and she just kind of just disappeared, which is very strange. But I think it was really cool that he let William Friedkin, right?
Yeah.
Come and document this case, because he was like, the exorcism was a pretty accurate portrayal of how exorcisms are. So I think that you should be the one to come and document it, because you have shined us in a certain light that I feel like it was important to see. Or at least maybe
that kind of made it, I guess, mainstream,
Yeah.
like popular. Yeah.
I don't think we would have known about exorcisms if it wasn't for that movie. Somebody would have done it eventually, but it was a freaking Academy Award winning movie, dude. It was one of the last horror movies to ever win the Academy Award, which the only other one that I can think of is Silence of the Lamb in 93 or something like that.
Yeah.
And The Exorcist was in 76 or 78 or something like that.
Yeah.
I need to watch the movie again as a horror fan. watch it again, just kind of just to watch history, you know. But man, this stuff really does scare the crap out of me. So I'm hesitant, but I'll do it. I'll do it for a good time. You know, I
Just
won't
from
tell
an
people.
analytical sense, not like a
Yeah, for sure.
So I watched a movie and I was interested in the plot. Yeah, I did some little googling about, because one of the plot points of the movie that I thought was really interesting was how in the beginning, when he's in front of that tribunal, he talks about how 98% of his cases are mental health crises, and 2% are actual demonic possessions.
Yeah,
And how he says he always refers the exorcisms to like a doctor first, or they
for sure.
go through the right channels before he does an actual exorcism. So I did some googling, and I stumbled upon a Washington Post article by a psychiatrist who has assisted the Church of Exorcism. Like, he's actually been like
A psychiatrist, not an exorcist. Okay.
Yeah, he's from the science angle of it.
Yeah.
But his name's Richard Gallagher. He is a board certified psychiatrist, is a professor of psychiatry at New York Medical, and a psychoanalyst on the faculty of Columbia University. And according to this article, the world's foremost scientific expert on the subject of diabolic attack. And he has been an active member of the International Association of Exorcists since the 1990s.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and Richard, he's written one book so far. I think it came out last year, actually, called Demonic Foes. And it's just about his time being an analyst during exorcisms, and like what his scientific angle of it is. So he wrote this Washington Post article. He writes about his firsthand experience with exorcisms and how he got involved with the church. So I'm just going to read a little bit about what he wrote, and it kind of lines up. I don't know anything about the movie or what the production was like or how much they took from different source materials, but like a lot of what he talks about, I feel like it could have influenced the movie as well.
Okay.
But it's from his point of view in the article. He writes,
in the late 1980s, I was introduced to a self-styled satanic high priestess. She called herself a witch and dressed the part with flowing dark clothes and black eyeshadow around to her temples. In our many discussions, she acknowledged worshiping Satan as his queen. I'm a man of science and a lover of history. After studying the classics at Princeton, I trained in psychiatry at Yale and in psychoanalysis at Columbia. That background is why a Catholic priest had asked my professional opinion, which I offered pro bono, about whether this woman was suffering from a mental disorder. At the height of the national panic about Satanism, and a case that helped induce the hysteria, Virginia McMartin and others had recently been charged with alleged satanic ritual abuse at a Los Angeles preschool. The charges were later dropped.
So just kind of background of like this time period. And then D&D is satanic and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was inclined to skepticism, but my subject's behavior exceeded what I could explain with my training. She could tell some people their secret weaknesses, such as undue pride. She knew how individuals she'd never known had died, including my mother and her fatal case of ovarian cancer. 6 people later vouched to me that during her exorcisms they heard her speaking multiple languages, including Latin, completely unfamiliar to her outside of her trances. This was not psychosis, it was what I can only describe as paranormal ability. I concluded that she was possessed. Much later, she permitted me to tell her story. So it began an unlikely partnership. For the past 2.5 decades and over several hundred consultations, I've helped clergy from multiple denominations and faiths to filter episodes of mental illness, which represent the overwhelming majority of cases, from literally the devil's work. It's an unlikely role for an academic position, but I don't see these two aspects of my career in conflict. The same habits that shape what I do as a professor and psychiatrist, open-mindedness, respect for evidence, and compassion for suffering people, led me to aid in the work of discerning attacks by what I believe are evil spirits, and just as critically, differentiating these extremely rare events from medical conditions. Is it possible to be a sophisticated psychiatrist and believe that evil spirits are, however seldom, assailing humans? Most of my scientific colleagues and friends say no because of their frequent contact with patients who are deluded about demons, their general skepticism of the supernatural, and their commitment to employ only standard peer-reviewed treatments that do not potentially mislead or harm vulnerable patients. But careful observation of the evidence presented to me in my career has led me to believe that certain extremely uncommon cases can be explained no other way. Richard then goes on to say how there has been a growing demand for exorcisms. He notes that the Catholic Church has responded by offering greater resources for clergy members who wish to address the problem. In 2010, for instance, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops organized a meeting in Baltimore for interested clergy. And then in 2014, Pope Francis formally recognized the IAE, which is the International Association of Exorcists.
You mean the Avengers of Exorcism?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Avengers,
Yeah.
Avengers Initiative.
Shield. Dude, that's crazy.
And then he further goes on to write basically what we touched upon, where in the church there's gross misuse and abuse when it comes to exorcisms. And he says, unfortunately, not all clergy involved in this complex field are as cautious as the priest who first approached me. In some circles, there's a tendency to become overly preoccupied with demonic explanations and to see the devil everywhere. Fundamentalist misdiagnoses and absurd or even dangerous treatments, such as beating victims, have sometimes occurred, especially in developing countries. This is perhaps why exorcism has a negative connotation in some quarters. People with psychological problems should receive psychological treatment. And then he talks about kind of what he's witnessed and his angle as a person of science and how can he explain the stuff he's seen. But I believe I've seen the real thing. Assaults upon individuals are classified either as demonic possessions or as slightly more common but less intense attacks, usually called oppressions. A possessed individual may suddenly, in a type of trance, voice statements of astonishing venom and contempt for religion, while understanding and speaking various foreign languages previously unknown to them. The subject might also exhibit enormous strength or even the extraordinarily rare phenomenon of levitation. He then writes, I have not witnessed a levitation myself, but half a dozen people I work with vow that they've seen it in the course of their exorcisms. He or she might demonstrate hidden knowledge of all sorts of things, like how a stranger's loved ones died, what secret sins she has committed, even where people are at a given moment. These are skills that cannot be explained except by a special psychic or preternatural ability. I have personally encountered these rationally inexplicable features along with other paranormal phenomena. My vantage is unusual. As a consulting doctor, I think I've seen more cases of possession than any other physician in the world.
Wow.
Most of the people I evaluate in this role suffer from the more prosaic problems of a medical disorder. Anyone even faintly familiar with mental illnesses know that individuals who think they are being attacked by malign spirits are generally experiencing nothing of the sort. Practitioners see psychotic patients all the time who claim to see or hear demons. Histrionic or highly suggestible individuals, such as those suffering from dissociative identity syndromes, and patients with personality disorders who are prone to misinterpret destructive feelings, and what exorcists sometimes call a pseudo-possession, via the defense mechanism of an externalizing projection. But what am I supposed to make of patients who unexpectedly start speaking perfect Latin? I approach each situation with an initial skepticism. I technically do not make my own diagnosis of possession, but inform the clergy that the symptoms in question have no conceivable medical cause.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's more to this article, and it's interesting. It's an interesting read, and I might check out his book or
Yeah. We'll put it in the link below, guys, if you want to read more about it. We'll put it in the bio.
For sure. And and it just touches upon how we should meet the needs of the afflicted with the appropriate method of help instead of using standard blanket mythologies that do more harm than good. Like if it's a mental health case, there should be a therapist there and not a cop or whatever and stuff like that. Okay, finally he ends our article with this.
In the end, however, it was not an academic or dogmatic view that propelled me into this line of work. I was asked to consult about people in pain. I have always thought that if requested to help a tortured person, a physician should not arbitrarily refuse to get involved. Those who dismiss these cases unwittingly prevent patients from receiving the help they desperately require, either by failing to recommend them for psychiatric treatment, which most clearly need, or by not informing their spiritual ministers that something beyond a mental or other illness seems to be the issue. For any person of science or faith, it should be impossible to turn one's back on a tormented soul.
Dang.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Like, there's a real person who
Is not a Christian who
Is
from the science
involved,
angle,
yeah.
he is involved as an exorcist. Yeah, he is basically vouching that this is all real. At least that he can't explain all the supernatural events that are going on. So, holy cow. Haunting, let me tell you.
interesting stuff.
Definitely. Well, that's basically gonna do it for this episode, guys. I have a peculiar experience about a possession that I saw when I was 11 that I when watching this movie kind of brought back memories of, and I'd love to talk about it another time. Maybe that'll be in maybe another exorcism episode or maybe a possession episode. I don't know exactly, but I'll tell it another time. And also, we want to dive into the real story of the exorcism of Emily Rose as well, and that'll be another episode in this series, maybe way later on. We don't want to put them too close together. But meanwhile, go watch Pope's Exorcist if you haven't seen it. It's a lot of fun. It's spooky. Warren, sign us off.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like the show, please rate and review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, or your podcast app of choice. You can find us on Instagram at The Skullcrawlers, on Twitter at _Skullcrawlers, and on YouTube by searching for The Skullcrawlers Movie Club or going to bit.ly/Skullcrawlers. And as always, sleep with one eye open because you never know who's watching.
And thanks for wearing your brown pants. See ya.